Now, many of our viewers might remember the story of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who died in custody of the Iranian morality police 2 years ago and sparked the massive woman, life, freedom protests that swept through the Islamic Republic. Well, now, 2 years later, there are no more protests, and the UN is accusing Iran of intensifying its repression of women, including cracking down on women not wearing the mandatory headscarf and saying they live in a system that relegates them to second-class citizens. Now, joining us from New York is Camelia Entekabifard, editor-in-chief of the Independent Persian. Thank you very much for joining us, Camelia. It's been 2 years since women all over the world were cutting their hair on social media in solidarity with the Iranian women. The stories were making headline. Since then, according to the UN, the situation has gotten worse. What is your take on this?
Thank you very much for hosting me, and Shalom Shabbat to you and your viewers. It's very sad reading the human rights report of the United Nations, just sitting about the oppression Iranian women suffering in the Islamic Republic. A human rights report has to address all the genders and not limiting that to only women's headscarf issue. I am Iranian, and I understand, like millions of the other Iranians, our problem with this regime is very deep. We want the regime changes, and it's not only limited to the headscarves. And it's heartbreaking when we see these reports from different human rights organizations, which mainly has been written by the far-right people, doesn't like to address the rights of the people to exercise their power of the freedom, the free election, and about to choose who likes to lead their countries. Many men has been killed during Mahsa's movement. Some of them hanged, and none of them has been addressed here. And I don't like to just be talk about the women's veil issue. It is a problem for the Iranian woman, but it's not the only issue that we say if this has been sorted out with the regime, Iranian doesn't have any problem with the system anymore. No, it's not correct.
Right, so this is not just a problem for the women in Iran, this is a systematic problem with the regime in Iran. But despite this new report that we're hearing from, or that came out from the UN, do you think that the protests back then, 2 years ago, might still somehow have had an effect on society, perhaps on people who were able to participate and then see a possibility for some change, and then even though it didn't happen, like that it might still have had an effect somehow?
It had been affected somehow. Iranians learn next time when they have a major protest for the regime change, they should not rely on the Western powers to support them. Unfortunately, during Mahsa's movement, there were so many false promises comes from European countries, the United States. Let me name it, from the UK to Germany and France and the US. All they promised Iranians to stand with them. They boycott this regime, and they support the opposition leaders. For example, the main opposition, the son of the former king of Iran, Prince Reza Pahlavi. None of them has been granted. And at the end, we learned that they were behind the scene negotiating with the Islamic Republic. The U.S. were engaged to release their hostages, the dual citizen from Tehran, and the West, they were worried about the war between Ukraine and Russia and the other interests they had in the region. So Iranians learned when next time there is a protest in Iran for the regime change, they should only trust each others and none of the foreign nations. And even this report you mentioned, they were citing about the rights of the minorities, religious minorities, and this is also increased a fuel of the sectarian issues in Iran rather than helping them. In Iran, we don't recognize any minorities and majorities. We are an old nation, and we see all of us as an Iranians. We didn't born yesterday to be segregated like this. And also, this demonstration shows how big unity is existing between Iranian from north to south, east to west, regardless of their ethnics and their religious. Just seeing the issues on Iran like this, it wouldn't help Iranians, and it makes them to don't believe on these reports, and they criticize them. I would like to also mention, such as Afghanistan too. We were just hearing the United Nations is speaking about women and girl rights. They can go to school and they cannot exercise their freedom in public. But I asked this question many times at the UN, and I asked, what about the others? If the man has the right to participate in politics, to exercise their rights, is it an election in Afghanistan? People can choose their leaders? No. Limiting the issue to this little, not the little, it still is very big, but just singularizing one issue, it means they don't want to see the big problem. And Taliban is a big problem for Afghanistan, and the Islamic Republic is a big problem for 85 million of the Iranians. So that's what we like to see at this report, which unfortunately they don't dare to talk about it because they were negotiating or they are engaged politically with the Islamic Republic.
All right. As an Iranian, what do you think what's the biggest challenge that needs to be tackled? And do you have faith in the country to get better? Briefly.
I do have faith because Mahsa told the Iranian, all of us should stick to one faith. And I really get in tears. And they have to just trust each other. And generally speaking about what is the best to serve for the Iranian people is the unity. If the world wants to help Iranian, they have to boycott the regime. For example, next week, a huge delegation of the Islamic Republic will visit the United Nations for the General Assembly. Myself, last week, I saw the grandson of Ayatollah Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic in New York. So that's why these people are here. What are they doing here? Are they negotiating with the United States over the sanctions? Are they protocol of the visiting president of the Islamic Republic? Those things we like to see ban travel of the regime's political leaders.
So boycotting the regime, going directly after the regime in order to help the people. Camilla and Kabifard, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us. We really appreciate it.